actually wanted to... This is what the thumbnail was about and everything, so we will be getting into conservation and hunting. So, first things first, Today in Science. Today in Science, by the way, is where I get all the science news that runs above my head here. So, if for days I don't have live from the Hive, if you want to know what Today in Science is, it's just todayinsci.com. Now, Today in Science, American president and conservationist Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, whose term included efforts to conserve national resources, especially the passage of the New Land Reclamation Act in 1902. He was the first president to ride in an automobile, go underwater in a submarine, or fly in an airplane. Immediately after leaving his presidency, he undertook a safari to Africa as a hunter and naturalist. In 1913, he traveled on a scientific expedition to the interior of Brazil, which produced geographic, geological, and zoological information, and almost 2,000 specimens of birds and mammals were collected for the American Museum of Natural Science. Whew, okay. Yes, Americanism reached the marrow of his bones, blah, blah, blah. Okay, never before in my life has it been so hard for me to accept the death of any man as it's been for me to accept the death of Theodore Roosevelt. Hold on, I thought this was... Is this a different article? There was something I was looking for about... about his conservation efforts. Let me see here. Okay, in 1908, the 3-day conference of governor opened at the White House, called by President Theodore Roosevelt to consider the problem of conservation. It was attended by the governors of the states and territories, the members of the Supreme Court, and the cabinet, scientists, and various national leaders. On May 15th, 1908, the governors adopted a declaration supporting conservation. One result was the National Conservation Commission, appointed by Roosevelt on the 8th of June, 1908, which prepared the first inventory of the natural resources of the United States, with chairmen for water, forests, land, and minerals. Also, the conference led to annual governors' conferences, and appointment of 38 state conservation commissions throughout his life. Before, during, and after his presidency, Roosevelt was an ardent, knowledgeable naturalist, which was reflected in his concern for the land while president. Okay, so the thing about Teddy Roosevelt that I want to make clear is, obviously conservationist. He was also a hunter, though. As I read in that previous page, he contributed a lot to the specimens that were collected and used in museums around the U.S. Yeah, I think there's Teddy Roosevelt specimens all over the U.S. in museums, but not just from the Amazon, but also from other areas. He was also a great outdoorsman of the western frontier of the U.S., which was dwindling in his day, but was still there and still hanging in there. So, yeah, that was part of it. Is Brainbug able to ground the instantiation of the necessary ultimate grounding precondition of the substantiation, providing all possible, impossible possibilities as an atheist? Oh man, now I have to take my channel down. Damn it, you got me. Sorry guys, that's it. We're done. No more Brainbug. No more Hive. All right, so today I am attempting in my best capacity, and I am no Teddy Roosevelt, but to take up this mantle of conservation and hunting balance, because this popped up in my feed recently, and I do not celebrate the death of anybody at all. That's not the one I was talking about. The death of anybody, the death of any animal at all. I will not celebrate these hunters getting their trophies. I will not celebrate them killing the organisms that they're killing, especially when they're killing apex predators and such. It seems ridiculous and redundant. But there is a great deal of argument to be made for trophy hunting being a benefit to conservation of rare species, because the efforts and money that goes into preserving these organisms to keep the revenue flow coming from these rich hunters preserves land aside for the organisms to thrive in, make sure they have a steady and healthy population. The government themselves in some of these African countries go out and tend to these animals that they normally would not have any interest in financially, and make sure that their ecology is healthy and that the animals are healthy and that they are thriving in order to sustain a population to keep the revenue flow from these hunters coming, because they throw a lot of money at these nations. Now, whether or not that all that money goes into preservation and conservation is questionable, and there are many organizations out there who will throw a monkey wrench right into that theory, but the effort is unavoidably obvious that these countries are doing this. They are setting aside these reserves, that they are making an effort to preserve these animals. Whether those efforts are successful or the measures that they're taking are a success is hit and miss. From what I've understood, a lot of it is miss, which is unfortunate, but there is a market for them, and that market does encourage governments, especially governments with a capitalist system, to preserve these environments for the animals as a resource. So, I guess I'm switched around. This was the thing I was talking about. So, back in 2017, this trophy hunter who hunts lions and elephants was eaten by a crocodile. His name here, let me see here, Scott Van Zyl, well-known South African prize hunter. Also had a safari firm where he took clients on large game hunts in addition to being a hunter himself. Lions, cheetahs, giraffes, and elephants were among his prey. So elephants I cannot agree with. I'm not going to support any hunting of any species of elephant at this point in time. If and when the populations rebound to a pre-industrialized level, it's definitely something we could talk about. And that's dubious too, because elephants were suffering from human encroachment well before the Industrial Revolution as well. So we could really go back to if we get their numbers back up to before the Roman era, then we'll talk about hunting elephants. But giraffes, okay, I could see hunting giraffes as a prey animal for trophy hunting. Now, again, that's pending that the proceeds go to preserving the environment for these animals, and that they are being taken care of and tended to properly, and that they're allowed to. So I say tended to, I mean very hands-off tended to, just making sure, that humans aren't blocking the rivers or deforestation or mowing down the land for agriculture and things like that. As long as the money is going towards preservation of an environment for them to live in, because if the money is going towards programs that are going to help destroy the giraffes' habitat, then that's kind of counterproductive. That's just double impact on their population. It's a very bad thing. It's going to have a very negative impact on giraffes and the animals that share the giraffe's habitat. So no, don't do that. But with this guy, and it popped up on my Facebook feed. So, and it's been a couple of years ago, but people just pop things in as they see them. And people were really celebrating this guy's death, and I don't agree with that. He was operating, as far as I can tell, within the parameters of the law. So, I mean, you want to blame you can't really blame the individual as much if you got a problem with the system that they're in. So you want to blame the system. You don't want to blame the individual. Mr. Scott Van Zyl was operating within a system that was allowing for this, that was telling him that it was that he had fair use to utilize their game and to hunt these large animals, and he wasn't doing anything illegal. Now, ethically speaking, I don't think that trophy hunting is beneficial to any organism. Just in and of itself, it's actually just the revenue system that makes it beneficial. And until capitalism is overturned, until we have a system where money isn't the end all be all for any actions that we take, we are going to need some kind of monetary incentive to preserve these animals. So these people, not just Mr. Van Zyl, but all these government officials making these decisions, they need a monetary reason. They need a capitalist reason to preserve these organisms. So trophy hunting is one way for them to do that. I would never trophy hunt. I'm not a hunter. I've hunted in the past. I grew up in rural Missouri. You don't get to reach adulthood without going out on a hunt. I've hunted coon and I've hunted deer. I would not do either of those things on my own. But I did. And oh, hey Ethan, good to see ya. So yeah, until we can overturn capitalism, we're just going to have to deal with trophy hunting, because it's the only way not the only way, it's the most effective way to preserve these species from being wiped off the face of the earth, is to have a monetary reason to have them around for these folks to go out and kill them, of course, but only when they reach a sustainable population. So the question is, what is that point? And that's going to depend on a lot of things. That's part of the reason why I said about elephants. So elephants should not be hunted. They have a long lifespan, and they reproduce slowly, and their population is too sparse for such endeavors. So I don't agree with that, and I don't agree for the most part, I don't agree with hunting predators. But really, when it comes to predators like lions, tigers, cheetahs, all the big cats and bears, that's really the only thing that's going to save them from being wiped out, is people having a financial interest in keeping them alive for hunters, because economically speaking, that's their only value to the economy as a trophy species. So having a monetary reason to keep them around is necessary. It's required. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. If species don't have any value to society, the best you can do is just appeal to human nature and say, "Oh, this poor animal." That is not going to get you as much money as saying, "Hey, you can hunt and keep a trophy of this tiger if you give us all this money to help maintain a habitat for these tigers to live in." That's just the way it is. I'm sorry, and I'm probably going to get canceled for taking this position and I'm not pro trophy hunting at all, but I am a realist who lives in a capitalist system and understands that in order to preserve these species, we need a reason for them to be preserved. But is the trophy hunting providing the consistent conservation benefits? A report by the Democratic staff of the House Committee of Natural Resources. Note, this report has not been officially adopted by the Committee of Natural Resources and may not necessarily reflect the view of its members. Released in June 13th, 2016. So this is a little bit dated, but that's okay. Kind of give us an idea where things were headed anyway. Hunting of imperiled animals can save species from extinction. It is claimed that is counterintuitive to some and makes perfect sense to others. It is also the official position of the United States government, with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services claiming that well-managed wildlife programs that include limited sustainable sport hunting can and have provided a significant long-term benefit to the population of many species. One, however, the debate has reached a fever pitch since 2015 death of Zimbabwe's famed Cecil the lion at the hands of an American dentist and trophy hunting hobbyist Walter Palmer. I think this is a typo here. It might be Water Palmer, but I think it was Walter Palmer. The report evaluates that claims as it pertains to prized species and popular hunting locations, and examines the conditions under which the trophy hunting may contribute to conservation. Hey, Doc Fearsome. Good to see you this morning. Many governments and a number of private and non-profit groups, including conservation organizations, have long viewed well-regulated hunting as an important conservation tool. Indeed, much of North American system of wildlife management is based on the principle that most hunters want healthy populations of game animals so that they will always have something to hunt. That's kind of my argument there about the capitalist gain. And if monetize hunting these animals to put money into the conservation system is the argument they're talking about here, and we're going to find out what they have to say about it, what the author here has to say. In places like the United States, where laws against wildlife poaching are generally well respected and enforced, and transparent mechanisms funnel taxes and fees generated by hunters to effective conservation programs, hunting has helped restore populations of some prized game species when quotas were based on sound science. In places where hunting is poorly managed, as is the case in some parts of Africa, that claim trophy hunting provides conservation benefits is much harder to prove, especially for species with populations that have already been depleted. By definition, trophy hunters hunt to bring home a trophy for display consisting of all or part of the kill. In order to help ensure trophy hunting does not contribute to the extinction of a species, the Endangered Species Act requires that hunting trophies of wildlife listed as endangered or threatened may only be brought into the United States if their importation, and by extension the hunt, enhances the survival of the species. This high threshold is an important and appropriate safeguard against extinction. An analysis of 5 major threatened and endangered game species, the African elephant, African lion, black rhinoceros, southern white rhinoceros, and leopard, of 4 countries, Namibia, South Africa, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe, found that trophy hunting is managed well in some areas and poorly in others. In many cases, the laws, institutions, and capacity necessary to make trophy hunting benefit conservation are lacking. The analysis also found that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, FWS, the agency responsible for allowing or prohibiting protected species imports, could make significant improvements to its permitting process that would help ensure that only trophies which truly enhance species survivals are allowed into the country. The report makes the following recommendations: ensure that trophy hunts benefit conservation, close regulatory loopholes that harm protected species, tighten trophy import permitting requirements, increase fees for trophy hunting to fund science and conservation, allow only imports taken using fair chase hunting methods. So that's like no baiting them and then shooting them is that last one. But yes, these all are fine points to me, and I think that this is basically my position on the whole thing, and where I stand on it. I think that we can do trophy hunting I think we can allow for trophy hunting, at least within the system that we have, if we regulate it in such a way to help preserve the species. That's really the only way that the U.S. can impact species in other countries, like these African countries listed here, other places where big game hunting takes place is like India, and other Southeast Asian countries, South America, of course, in the Amazon, and Brazil and Bolivia, Colombia. There's big game hunting as well. So as Americans, our greatest impact on that is our rich dentists and doctors that go out to these places and hunt and spend money in those countries. We need to make sure that when these guys go out, that they're following within these criteria here, and that we do make it so that for every tiger that they kill, we are preserving the life of at least 2 tigers in order to make it worthwhile. So, yeah, that's pretty straightforward and simple. Let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, that's just where I was looking at. That guy killed by the... Okay. Trophy hunting, a complex picture. We should be wrapping up here in just a minute, but I'm just going to finish up about... Yeah, there's big game hunting in the western U.S. too, but it's pretty well regulated right now. I mean, yes, our big game in most of the U.S. has been completely and utterly obliterated, but some of the western states, especially in the upper Rockies there, we do maintain populations of some large game animals. And I would love to see those large game animals restored in population across the nation, but people are just terrified of that prospect of having mountain lions living in the hills and stuff. Which I get. They're scary animals, I understand, but yeah. Anyhow, trophy hunting has become a divisive topic, but calls for an outright ban risk undermining the substantial contribution that well-managed hunting can make to conservation. So-called smart bans, which selectively target operators or even countries that fail to ensure hunting delivers meaningful conservation outcome and benefits to rural communities, could help clean up an industry plagued by corruption and bad practices. Yep, like Professor David McDonald with the lion known as Cecil. That last article say it was a different hunter, something water. Anyway, and I thought maybe it was Walter. Anyhow, I once had a study animal shot by hunters. In my case, it was a leopard known to us as Wilbur. The first time I encountered Wilbur, he materialized out of a wall of apple leaf scrub and walked right up to my open Land Rover, brushing the side of my vehicle while I held my breath. Leopards can be like that, either so shy that they disappear long before you see them, or so bold they ignore you completely. This was nearly 10 years ago, but I still remember the shock, pain, and anger we felt all when the shock, pain, and anger we all felt when word reached us to our research camp that Wilbur, by then fitted with a VHF tracking collar, had been shot by hunters. Scientists are supposed to remain dispassionate observers, but when you spend hundreds of hours in the company of a wild animal, you get to know its character, and inevitably a bond forms. You become invested in the animal's fate. While a respectful distance remains, a steady animal's death is still mourned, especially when its death has only served to furnish someone with pathetic trophies. All right, so this brings to mind like Gorillas in the Mist. I don't know if you've never read the book. I have a copy back here somewhere. I actually read that when I was in the hospital. But that's what a lot of it's about is anti-trophy hunting for gorillas, because gorillas used to be a heavy target of trophy hunting. They'd have their hands cut off and made into ashtrays, their hands and feet made into ashtrays for Westerners. It's a gross practice. that still continues to this day in some remote areas, and there's still black market demand for them. Yeah, but so you can see how spending time in the field studying an animal, studying a group of animals, a population, you could form attachments to members in the group or to the group as a whole. We learned that the client had been sitting in a hide with his professional hunting guide, staking out a bait. This is how leopards are shot, from a seat in cover and at short range, with the big cat lured to its death. It seems not so different from shooting fish in a barrel. In the gloaming, the hunter and his guide claimed not to have seen the collar around Wilbur's neck. I've always found that hard to believe. Collars are very obvious on leopards, contrasting strong against the spotted fur and sitting proud on their short coat. I suspect that Wilbur was just too fine of a specimen to pass up. Under time pressure, with the client having paid thousands of dollars for his trophy, I believe the guide chose not to see the collar and sanctioned the shot, but I can never know for sure. Yeah. And that's the baiting thing. That's that last thing that we were looking at, where we're giving the suggestions on what steps to take. This kind of hunting should be banned, should be outlawed. I don't agree with baiting them, and while you sit in a chair 15 feet away and just execute them as they come to eat your bait. That's not hunting. That's not that no hunter that I know would say that that's what they want to do. But it is what it is. I mean, if you're hunting to feed yourself, you live in a rural area or something, and you live in hunting's legal in your area, and you're gonna eat it, then yeah, I guess getting that close to it is a boon. But if you're just trophy hunting to show what a awesome hunter you are, this is not the way to go about it. Nobody's impressed by you luring a big cat in while you sit safely up in a tree hide and shooting it at essentially what would be like not point blank, but within a few feet of the animal. You're just executing it at that point. Sorry, I got a little bit of emotion flaring up there. Sorry, everybody. Whatever the truth of Wilbur's death, the client and his guide left the country shortly afterward, and not long after, the hunting was suspended in Botswana. The hunter had been perfectly entitled to shoot a leopard in that area, but the established code of practice was and is to avoid shooting collared research animals, partly out of courtesy. A great deal of time and effort is invested in deploying collars, and partly because good hunters value the insight that the collar-studied animals give everyone with an interest in managing and conserving wildlife. Today, Botswana is slowly opening up its hunting industry again, but this is attracting vocal criticism from some Western animal rights campaigners. This anti-hunting campaign strikes a chord with many whom imagine an overweight, inanely grinning hunter posing proudly next to a butchered animal are repugnant. Such seemingly indefensible sport is favored by Donald J. Trump and ex-king of Spain, but should it be simply banned? The threat is not hunting. Perhaps surprisingly, few conservation scientists endorse these populist calls to ban hunting. Instead, many are alarmed by the potential unintended consequences of such a ban. Why is this? When so many conservation biologists are disgusted by trophy hunting, when some of us have even lost well-loved studied animals to hunters' bullets, why are we reluctant to support total ban? The truth is that trophy hunting is not the main threat facing wild animals in Africa. For most species, it is not a threat of any sort. In fact, the opposite is often true. Trophy hunting provides a means of funding conservation work and protecting habitat that has sustained wild animal populations across large swaths of the continent, where without hunters' dollars, wild bush would soon be taken over by agriculture or the wildlife decimated by poachers. Across many African safari countries, the area of land managed for hunting is actually equal to or larger than the area set aside for phototourism in national parks. This is why lions are in fact increasing in southern Africa, where they are legally hunted, while their population has crashed in countries like Kenya, where trophy hunting has been banned since 1977. Ditto giraffes, ditto rhinos, ditto elephants. If we ban trophy hunting in areas of land protected for wildlife, could shrink drastically, putting these populations at risk. But wait, I hear you cry, why do hunters have to kill these things? Why can't we turn these hunting zones into more ecotourism destinations? Why can't phototourism fund the protection of these habitats? This idea sounds appealing, but the reality is that away from popular tourist destinations like the Serengeti or the Masai Mara, tourist operators often struggle to attract guests. Animals may be too scarce, biting flies too abundant, or views too unremarkable. Do you know anyone who has been on a photo safari to Chad or Central African Republic? Botswana's attempt. Botswana did try to auction its hunting areas to photographic tourism companies after its 2012 hunting moratorium, but only a few of the most desirable ex-hunting wildlife management areas were leased successfully, and most have remained unoccupied since the ban. Hunters were happy to visit these areas. Other tourists are not. But the miles and miles of flat, thorny scrubland where animals are rarely seen and the view may be limited to a few meters remains vital for wildlife. They link protected areas together, securing gene flow between otherwise isolated populations, and they provide refuges for so-called fugitive species like cheetahs and African wild dog species that can struggle to compete with larger predators in a more popular tourist area where lions and hyenas dominate. In Kaza Transfrontier Conservation Area, 500,000 square kilometers, 200,000 square miles of wildland reaching across Namibia, Angola, Zambia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe to form the largest contiguous protected area outside of Antarctica. Hunting areas play a vital role in maintaining landscape scale integrity. If hunting were banned, what would happen to this connectivity? Since hunting was banned in Botswana, the boreholes that hunters paid for have dried up and poaching has reportedly increased. Poaching takes a far greater toll on wildlife populations than trophy hunting, with a far greater impact on females and overall population numbers. Meanwhile, since hunting bans, rural communities in Botswana have reported increasing conflicts with and resentment towards wildlife, now that they do not receive any income from hunting to help compensate for crop loss, stock depredation, and thankfully rarer human mortality caused by lions, elephants, and other wild animals. The situation was unsuitable, and so Botswana's government reopened trophy hunting, offering the promise of income, employment, and meat to communities living with wildlife. In countries that support more elephants than any other, Botswana is surely entitled to manage its wildlife as it sees fit. But this hasn't stopped distant celebrities and animal rights campaigners from criticizing this move, causing some of the affected community to feel understandably aggrieved. I think it's talking about Sheena and Elizabeth. Grow clover patches for bees. Yes, please. I leave a strip in my yard of wildflowers. I encourage everybody to do so. Check your city ordinance. If you're part of a homeowners association, you may not be able to do that. But and thank you, Doc Pearson. Yeah, I'm trying to find a balanced position to take on this topic, because there is some good points being made here as well. And as a conservation activist, I have to think about what's best for all the animals and their biomes that they live in, and not just the individual getting hunted, of course, but it's hard to not get emotionally attached to different individuals. I follow several individual big cats on Twitter in the wild, and a couple of Facebook channels, or not Facebook channels, but YouTube channels for individual wild big cats and individual prides. In response to an anti-trophy hunting campaign supported by animal rights activists and celebrities, more than 50 African community leaders recently signed an open letter defending their basic human right to sustainably use the natural resources on which our communities' livelihoods depend, and urging Ricky Gervais, Ed Sheeran, and others to stop undermining our globally recognized conservation efforts. Yeah, this is it's a complicated matter. It's so complicated, guys. This is so overarching and a little bit intense, to be fair. And there are good points being made on both sides of these arguments, enough to make me waffle back and forth about this topic over and over again. I like the way that we're doing things in the U.S. I would like to see similar models adapted to where there's a conservation department that tends to and manages the land that these animals are living on. And like they were saying, describing the landscape not being exactly photogenic, but definitely good for hunting. So I get that. Oh yeah, I see Germania popped in, and I see Maya's here, and Kat. Good to see you guys. Ian Davenport. Sorry if you popped in and I missed you. I'm sorry if I didn't say hi. Conservationists who caution against banning hunting do not pretend that hunting is an ideal solution. We simply recognize that it serves a valued purpose in places where no other mechanism for protection of habitat currently exists. Right, like I was saying. Capitalism is the problem with everything. Capitalism is the enemy of our species. Sorry, I'll lay off the politics. For most conservationists, a hunter's desire to kill an animal like an elephant remains baffling and repugnant. And I relate to that. It's repugnant to me too. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I agree. We have to work within the system that we have, though. But utilitarian acceptance of trophy hunting is based on an understanding of the community's benefit that can derive from well-managed hunting, and the belief that even if such trophies might be objectionable, it represents a lesser evil than the catastrophic wildlife losses that would likely stem from premature bans. Indeed, some conservationists argue that a trophy hunting ban directly imperils biodiversity, while others have asked for a broadening of the debate. Shameful attempts have been made to impugn the motives of those voicing such concerns, with accusing fingers being pointed at those who have accepted funding from hunters, however small and however long ago. The same critics who claim hunting doesn't fund conservation then attack any conservation project partly funded by hunters. Ethic, value, and consequences. In truth, the ethical debate between those who favor a ban on trophy hunting and those who caution against a ban boils down to a debate between deontologists and consequentialist values. The deontologist argument holds that if an act, trophy hunting, is wrong, then it is bad regardless of any associated consequences. But this standard, shooting someone, would be considered wrong even if that person was a suicide bomber, and killing him saved innocent victims. The consequentialist argument holds that while an act may be bad in isolation, it may be the right thing to do if its consequences achieve a greater good. So, I am a consequentialist, and maybe Maybe. I'm also a pragmatist, though, so we need to find a system that works. And let's keep peeling down on the topic. An entropy fan has laid out some ideas here. Let me see what you have to say, entropy fan. I'm interested. Here's a well-balanced centrist position. We allow trophy hunting, but we hunt the rich folk who think hunting is a pastime and hobby instead. People who aren't hunting for food. When a rich hunter is killed, their estate is donated to the wildlife sanctuary in national parks across the world. Problem solved via a rational middle ground. So the problem there is not so much the issue. Again, that the hunters themselves, while you think low of them all you want, they're individuals who get off on killing powerful animals, or claiming to have killed powerful animals in the wild, because a lot of them kill them in situations like you see in this meme here, which is gross. Just say that they killed them in the wild, but the fact that the countries where these hunts take place at, that the people who live there resent the wildlife if they're not making money off of it. So the problem here is capitalism, but it's because why preserve the land for these animals if we're not making any money off of them? Phototourism in a lot of these areas does not work. These areas are going to be developed if they can't make profit off of them in some way from their natural state. So trophy hunting is really the only option for a lot of these lands in order to preserve them. It's a terrible situation, but that's where we're at. The hunting industry today is far from perfect. It does not always support proper habitat protection, and it is often linked with financial corruption and other unethical behavior. That is true, and that does happen. Short leases and the incentive to shoot as many animals as possible within poorly managed quota systems can lead to targeting of animals whose death may have a negative impact on the local population or genetic diversity. And hunting does not always funnel significant revenue back to the local communities it is so often boasted to support. It also remains an almost exclusively white industry, at least in terms of the professional hunters. Where hunting can be replaced by other revenue-generating models that equally support wildlife, ecosystems, integrity, and community development, those industries may be preferable. Yep. I know. That's the problem too. Is that a lot of people with no good intentions towards preserving these resources. It's like the oil industry. Keep bilking people out of it by a shortage is a good thing for people trying to sell something. Something being rare is good. So, are they trying to preserve the populations of these animals? I don't think all of them are. I don't think many of them don't care. They're just taking advantage of these laws opening up to allow them to do this. But whether or not their revenue goes back into the communities, and whether or not they, as individuals, want to preserve these species, if we can keep them within the confines of laws and restrictions and regulations that do benefit that, if we can make sure that the funding goes back into the conservation efforts and such, in an optimal system this works. But people are going to try to work around it and get around it. There are trumps everywhere. However, so-called non-consumptive tourism has its own negative impacts. In the Masai Mara, poorly behaved guides have caused mass drownings of wildebeest at river crossings, and the crowding of cheetahs in tourist hotspots is linked to significant increased cub mortality. Phototourism also has a much larger carbon footprint than hunting, requires more water extraction, and often leads to the unregulated spread of networks of vehicle tracks. In many areas, a mixture of hunting and phototourism can generate more revenue and support more jobs. In a post-COVID era, Africa needs every paying visitor it can attract. We live in an imperfect world. Does hunting need reform? Absolutely. Could it be better regulated? Undoubtedly. Should hunters take more responsibility for demanding ethical practices across the industry? Again, yes. But will trophy hunting ban at this time be good for wildlife? On balance right now, I believe the answer is no.